Welcome to the 2026 Digital Guardian Summit. I'm Stephanie Humphrey, head of content for MASK NextGen, and I am honored to be your host today. Every one of us watching today share something in common. We care about children growing up in a world that didn't exist when we were their age. A world where a phone is a doorway and not every door leads somewhere safe. But today, it's not about fear, it's about action. And over the next hour, you're going to meet people that are building a real solution. You'll hear some partners that are standing beside them, and you will learn how you can help protect millions of children one click at a time. I think about the work that I've done with Till Death Do You Tweet. I have a presentation that is, it can be an in-school seminar. It's usually a full school assembly called Till Death Do You Tweet. And it talks about digital citizenship and online safety and all the things that Mask NextGen covers, but Mask NextGen does it at scale. I was in Idaho about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, and I spoke to four high schools in 3 days. So it was a pretty rigorous schedule. I was doing a lot of running around, a lot of talking. And in those four high schools, in those 3 days, I had six students come to me and tell me that they had tried to commit suicide because of cyberbullying they had faced on the internet. And it just struck me because when I thought about it, when I took a moment to think about it, I had never not had a student come to me after my presentation and tell me that. There has never been a time, and I've been doing this presentation since 2012, and there has never not been a time that at least one student hasn't come to me after my presentation to tell me that they were being bullied, to thank me for speaking up and for saying something and for letting the other students know that it was not okay, or to share that they had attempted that as well. And at one of the schools in Idaho, there was a young lady there who shared that with me, and I asked her. I said, I literally asked her, "Why are you still here? Why do you think you're still here?" And her answer was, "Because of people like you." It, I still get choked up. Because of people like you who care, and who care enough to say that this is not okay. And it always, unfortunately, right now, it always ends up being the case that I get called in after something happens, after someone's been bullied, after a deep fake nude has circulated around the whole school, after a fake bomb threat has been called in, um, you know, maybe even unfortunately after a student commits suicide. And we can't wait until after something happens because by then it might be too late. We have to empower students to be able to make better decisions about how to handle the challenges that they are going to face online. These are not if, these are when. These challenges and these threats, it's not if, it is when they face these challenges online, because they will. They all will. We pray that they never have to, but we know we have to prepare them for when and not if. But we also have to help them to be more intentional about how they choose to show up online, because that is what interrupts some of those threats. When they get to determine and when they understand that they have a choice about how they show up online. And we have to prepare them for the world to come at the same time. There's a lot going on here, a lot of layers happening here, because we also have to prepare them for the world to come. Artificial intelligence is probably the biggest challenge facing all of us right now. And our students have to be ready to face it with knowledge, with understanding, with readiness, and with a fluency so that they can face the future with confidence. And that is exactly what MASK NextGen does. We help students be intentional about how they show up online, but we're also empowering them to face the threats that they are inevitably going to come up against on the internet. We want to empower them to face those with confidence, to understand what to do and who they can go to when they face these threats. So it's a dual edged, we're fighting on two fronts right now with MASK NextGen. And we're here to talk about today how we're doing that and how you can help us. And I am so excited now to talk to my next guest because she founded Mask Next Gen with a simple but urgent belief that every child deserves to be protected in the digital world just as fiercely as we protect them in the physical one. So I'm happy now to be joined by the founder and CEO of Mask NextGen, Avni Trivedi.
Hi,
Hey,
Stephanie.
Avni, how are you?
Good. How are you? Good
I'm
morning.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be having this conversation because I think it's so important. So let's just jump right in. What was that specific moment for you when you realized that there was a problem that needed to be addressed with Mask NextGen?
I wouldn't say it was a moment in time, but it was a series of incidents that, I got involved in a
Mhm.
way. First, just being interested in cybersecurity through my career in tech. I was just interested in the topic and reading the news. You just read about how kids' data is so pure and valuable that
Mhm.
education is one of the most targeted verticals there is, period, because of the data that it houses, as well as the lack of infrastructure generally to protect this data is kind of the target. It kind of stemmed from that to, as a parent of an 11 and 14-year-old, two girls now, I
Mhm.
don't know how to keep them safe. And you use the right words. I want to prepare them for this world in a way that I was prepared by my parents and the generation before. But I actually don't understand this world anymore because I didn't live in it. I grew up, in the 80s and 90s. My first computer in India was when I was 15 years old. And, at that point we had some chat groups like ICQ and AOL and all the things, but it was so nascent that we, as a parent, I don't have the understanding of this new world. So I started asking the question. So if I don't have it, and the schools are obviously, our data is already out there, my kids' data is already out there, what are schools doing to prepare them for this world as well? And the
Mhm.
answer is pretty similar, right? Because even the schools, whether intentionally or unintentionally, they're also grappling with how do we keep up with this technology and
Yeah.
how do we educate the students as well. So, which is the reason why you see a lot of bans, and you see a lot of taking the phones away and all these things, which are correct, because I think we over-indexed on screen in a lot of different ways. But the moment is, how do we prepare these kids? And as a parent, it horrifies me to send them into this world not being prepared.
Yeah.
But it also scares me if I don't prepare them for the workforce or for what they're supposed to do to be successful. Then, like you said, it's a double-edged sword. So like I said, it was a series of true triggers that made me realize, there is a reason why we need to think about this differently, and our kids in the next generation need to be prepared differently than we have been.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for the parents and educators watching here today, how would you describe the scale of the threat that children are facing online in 2026?
Absolutely. I think there's many statistics, but let's just start with the big one, right? That we all, track, which is every 22 seconds, a child is being reported as targeted by an online predator. This is not our statistic; it is by the cyber tip line that is run by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and every 22 seconds multiplies to millions and millions and millions of incidents if you calculate that correctly. So that's the big scare factor. But let's talk about the different nuances. You mentioned cyberbullying, right? 1 in 3 kids are actually targeted through some kind of cyberbullying, unfortunate circumstances that leads to depression. Ultimately, it could lead to suicide, as you mentioned. But I think there's a lot more depression, targeting, etc., mental health, anxiety, mental health crisis. That's just cyberbullying. Deep fakes and AI have exacerbated our landscape, right? So, you know, enticement of children is in the millions, like I just mentioned, with every 22 seconds. But deep fakes have grown to almost 500,000 reports to NCMEC this year in the first 6 months alone. And that is almost, a few 100% increase from last year. I think last year it was like 6,000 reports. And like I said, this is reported. We know how many unreported cases there are, right? So I tell my children, and I have 2 girls. I say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when your deep fake will be circulating and what do you do about it. So those are just some early statistics. Now you can say, okay, my kids are not going to be one of those. Maybe they're fortunate, but almost 86% of teens use AI, right? Actually, not even teens. I would say ages 9 to 17 use AI. 86%. And 4 out of 10 parents, and I'm sure I'm one of them too, don't know how to talk about AI safety. I think these are critical numbers to think about, right? We're trying to see if our kids are going to adopt AI. Yes, they are. I even tell a lot of parents, like, yeah, your Alexas and your Echoes at home, those are AI.
That's right.
And if your 3-year-old knows how to talk to them, they know how to use AI, right? And so there's a lot of this environment that is starting to get more and more crucial, as far as we need to teach discernment, critical reasoning, because
Hmm.
the targeting is very, very, very high, whether you know it or not. And hence these numbers really do tend to scare parents, but we need to be a little scared so that we can prepare correctly.
I think so. And I think, we'll use the term motivate as opposed to scared. We want to motivate people, because this is a situation that we have to get in front of at this point. We can no longer play a reactive role in how we address what is happening to our young people online. We have to get in front of it. And education has always been the most effective way to do that. But, how do you educate people and how do you educate kids effectively? We're going to get into that in a little bit, but talk about MASK NextGen, because it's been compared to you actually yourself. When you're giving people sort of the elevator pitch about it, you call it, Marvel meets Duolingo. So it's this Duolingo style platform for digital safety. What does that mean in practice for a kid that might be using it every day?
Yeah, and Duolingo is a good way to just have that level set on how kids use it. Actually, my kids are super motivated by Duolingo, so kudos to that platform on how they do that. They do it every day, the streaks, and they're just on it, even though they're learning different languages. And I think it stemmed from that, like, how do we want to drive? We don't want this to be a passive learning mechanism, because we all know. I mean, phishing training and corporate training is one of the least effective, as we know, because we're ingesting data, but it really is not driving behavioral change. How do we actually make this an intrinsic understanding of stranger danger for our kids? Like, my kids know not to talk to a stranger outside of the house, but do they understand how to identify that stranger online? And I think that intrinsic building is where I was motivated to see, how do kids learn, and how do we actually think about meaningful behavioral change. Kids love heroes, all of us do. Actually, they want to see characters that motivate them, that show leadership qualities, that take them through journeys that are outside of the realm of reality. And then they love to be challenged with more micro learning modules than just, bombarding them with an hour long lesson. And the combination of the two, and gamification, of course, helps motivate competition, and a different kind of learning, as we know, over the last decade has been very useful. So I want to really think about the next generation involving their own intrinsic critical reasoning, discernment, boundaries, understanding, empowering them in a way that they can actually be in this world without having to have anyone hand holding them or taking their screen away, right? I'll just give you an example. My daughter, she, and this is just the rebellious nature of teens sometimes. She, wanted Snapchat for a long time. I obviously said no, I'm not, she was too young for that, all those things. She doesn't still have it, FYI, but she got Snapchat on her phone by taking my phone, approving herself secretly. And when I discovered that, I was like, nope, why did you do that? Of course, the phone was taken away for 24 hours. But I sat down with her. I said, "What is it that you really need this for?" "Oh, I need my social circle. All my friends have it, peer pressure, all these things." And I think the conversation stemmed from, okay, let's talk about your goals with your social digital life, and then empower you and me together to build a roadmap for those goals. And those goals sometimes don't match what you need at this age, but I'm willing to listen to your reasoning and help you understand why you need to wait for some of this. So I think that's the empowerment I'm talking about, right? That's just conversational, but just teaching them all of this every day in a way that's fun and gamified just makes it a lot more easier for parents to have this conversation when things do get out of hand, or when they start asking the questions of needing social media or digital life or whatever. So I think it's giving them the tools in their toolbox to then empower them to have those conversations at home that cannot be that easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you had that conversation. You have no idea how many parents I've spoken to over the past 10 years that are just simply afraid to even broach the conversation. And it's like you have to talk to your kids, and something like Mass Next Gen makes that process a little bit easier for them because the kids are getting this education, they're excited about what they're learning, and then they can go home and kind of share that with their parents, and it gives you an entryway into how to engage them about these platforms and about the internet in general. So kudos to you, Mom. Tell us about Myra. Tell us who she is, what she does, and why it was important for you to have her grow up alongside the students as they get older in the curriculum.
Yeah, so Myra is our cyber guardian protagonist in the game. She is an AI that takes the kids on the missions and quests, and she's an AI for good. So, we start with Myra as a leadership, almost hero protagonist that the kids can look up to, but also as they go through the game, they realize she's one of them. Like, she's fallible. She, it's an AI, so she talks about her own limitations. So it's bringing in a lot more relatability, but also someone to look up to. And which is why the growing up in the game is very important, because we got a lot of feedback on this when we did the beta testing across thousands of kids, which is like, I don't relate. A 13-year-old was like, I don't relate to a young Myra because she's not me. She's just this little character, like a Dora here, but I'm not that. Like, I'm grown up. So growing up with the kids drove that relatability, but also it's about a character that embodies a lot of the qualities. And then thinking about the gender sensitivity and some of the dynamics around having a female protagonist is very positive for not only girls growing up, but also for boys who are seeing this as, there can be leaders that are women that we can follow, and that's totally fine. And I think it's a positive overall feeling. We didn't get any headwinds at all from any of the boys that we talked to. In fact, they loved it. They think about Lara Croft and all those characters. They're like,
Right.
there's no issue, frankly, from because I've had these questions before. But Myra truly is a culmination of what is good with what can be good with technology and how we can have kids relate to that.
I love it. I love it. I love Myra. I think she's fantastic. I think the team has done a wonderful job with how they envisioned her, and I think the kid. I think she's really going to resonate with young people. So you've seen some really great traction so far with school districts, with partners. What surprised you the most about the response you've gotten?
I think what surprised me the most is the fact that most schools, I mean, across the world, said they have never seen anything like it, and they have no formalized curriculum that has ever been, placed in front of their decision makers to say this is such an easy plug and play. This is, it's just the ease of the program has been a surprise tailwind. I would say they love it. It's like, okay, I love that teachers don't have to train. It's easy. But again, like I said, the lack of any formalized training on this topic across the world is just surprising given where we are with technology, right? Like we're talking about AI in ways that is so much more advanced than the training given to students. And I think everybody's catching up to it, but it's just surprising that it's not been thought through as quickly as the technology has developed.
I would go so far as to say shocking. I think we've passed surprised. A few years back. It is
Right.
absolutely shocking, and I'm going to say unfortunate. There's a stronger word I'm thinking about, but it really is shocking and unfortunate that we have sort of allowed this technology. And I'm not anti-innovation. I'm an engineer. So I want to see us come up with, cool things and cool technology. But the idea that the education, the policy,
Mhm.
lags so significantly far behind where the technology is right now, makes it even more critical for us at this moment,
Mhm.
to get involved. So, what makes this moment, culturally, technologically, for a platform? What makes this the right moment for Mass Next Gen to exist? Why
I
is
think
this the right time?
I think you mentioned exactly right. Like the adoption is skyrocketing everywhere, whether it's a school district in a rural area, whether it's a city school. It's just the adoption, and I'm talking schools because that's where the kids are. But in general, the adoption is through the roof. We talked about the scares and the figures around, the dangers, but think about the workforce, right? And we're preparing these kids to be successful ultimately, whether it's school districts or parents. 66% of employers ask for some kind of AI literacy on their job description. I mean, think about it. Like our CTO Joe Yamas will say, "I do not hire anybody, whether it's a coder, developer. Doesn't matter if they're not AI literate, they're not coming. I don't care how much Python they know, how much graphics they've done. Right? I mean, this is we're small, but that's just the world we're getting ready with, right?" 72% will say they'll hire a less expensive a junior head if they know AI versus a more experienced employee because of the AI, right? So the world is changing fast enough that the preparation needs to happen yesterday, like we talked. However, we are going to start today and we're going to do it right. One of the things that you mentioned about the shock factor, right? There is no global standard, which again, which is crazy, right? There is no global standard of how this should be thought about, talked. Of course, there's FOSSI, there's Common Sense Media, there is NICMIC, there's eSafety Australia, there's Council of Europe. India has NEP, which is a national education policy. Middle East has their own. So there's all these fragmented standards, but there's no one standard. And I think Mask does one thing which nobody else has done so far is we actually give the schools across the world a standard that they can get behind with shield. We don't create our own standards. We actually scrape all of them out there, so it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. But what we're doing is giving everybody an equal footing on what should be done at the grassroots level.
A student that maybe starts with Mask Next Gen now as a fourth grader
Mhm.
and follows the program because they're in a school district that understands why this is so important. So they've implemented it in all of their schools and their school districts from elementary all the way through high school. What would success look like for that fourth grader when they graduate from high school, having had this mask training throughout their school career?
I think to me, success would look like in two folds. One, they're not scared of the technology. They know what they're facing, right? The awareness, it's like teaching a language. I was thinking about that. Why do we start young with languages? Because when we do that, when the absorption power of a 7-year old to help keep and retain certain concepts is much higher than a 25-year old, right? It's very similar. If they know their critical reasoning boundaries earlier, they're going to be much more effective digital netizens of this world than we are. I mean, there's a reason why our cyber crimes are through the roof, even in the adult ages or even older, because we were never taught this basic understanding of how social engineering can truly be targeted in a way that's very personal, right? But if these kids are taught early enough, this is going to be part of their language, their vocabulary. They're going to know how to ask for help, which is what a lot of them are not doing anymore. They're going to know how to really critically think about what they're seeing every day online, whether it's media, whether it's news, and question, trust but verify, but still question their worlds a little bit more logically and effectively than we have been. So I think starting early means they are more successful, like I said, citizens of this world. They are, I'm hoping to see less cybercrime targeting at these kids who have graduated through the program because they are aware, more help given to each other, whether digitally or through other methods, which is, more empathy, more compassion for online presence, and ultimately true workforce effectiveness because they are a completely AI literate generation who understands what tools are in their toolbox, but also know when to say these tools have limits and we know how to use them. And we're empowered to actually be more effective producers and consumers in this economy than our generation before.
I love it. I love it. We're getting them on both fronts. So, for anybody watching right now that's still deciding whether or not to get involved, whether or not to invest, whether or not to think about MASK NextGen for their school or their students, what would you want them to understand the most?
I think that, like I said, this is a movement which we have started, but it's a movement that's urgent. It's a movement that needs community. It needs everybody to think about this as a must have
Yeah.
education. It is not a nice to have. It is not a curriculum, like I said,
It's not an elective.
it's not an elective, it's not an option. That I hear that a lot, like, oh, I still have to teach math, English, science. Of course. However, this is a life skill, a
Yeah.
foundational life skill that we all need to get behind, even with the screen time wars, the social media wars, which are all, as they need to be because there's a lot there. But educating our kids has to be as important as anything else that we do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Avni, thank you so much. This was amazing. We appreciate the work that you're doing. We appreciate your vision for Mass Next Gen, and we will be continuing to support your work. And we hope that everyone watching will do the same.
Thanks, Steph. This is great.
Thank you. So, everything you've heard today so far is possible because of people who decided to invest in it. Not just with words, that's important, but with real support. Mass NextGen is raising funds right now through Wefunder. It's a platform that lets everyday people invest in the companies and causes that they believe in. This is not some distant, ephemeral, sort of highfalutin boardroom deal. This is an open invitation for you to become a part of the mission. You don't have to be some millionaire that can afford to invest thousands of dollars. And you can invest on your phone in as little as 30 seconds. You can also easily share with others in your own community, and they can invest instantly. There are no complicated forms to fill out. You can even use Apple Pay if you want to. They just double click on your phone. Just makes it that much simpler. And of course, there's some cool perks for different investment levels as well. I think we're going to take a look at the Wefunder page just to show you exactly how easy it is. And you can see when you go to wefunder.com, you just search for MASK NextGen, AI driven digital safety for our children, one click at a time. And there's an intro video there. I believe I might be in that video. And then you can see some of the highlights about what MASK NextGen actually does. Some of our featured investors, thank you very much already for your support. You can meet our team as well. And there I am. Our children are under attack. And again, we're not trying to scare you. These are things that are actually happening, and we would be doing you a disservice if we weren't honest about cyberbullying and online predators and advanced phishing techniques and inappropriate content and AI generated deception. 72% of children now use an AI chatbot or ask an AI companion for advice. And you can see that there's a critical gap in the market. This is a $50 billion market opportunity. So this is something that we believe in. That's our head of product. We'll be hearing from him in just a few minutes, talking about why gamified learning actually works and why it's so effective. And these are our characters. And just like Avni told you, they grow with your students. So from elementary through middle and high school, the characters, the villains, and the threats and the challenges all evolve as kids get older so that they are fully prepared for all of the different types of threats they may face in an age appropriate way. And it's designed by experts, and we're pulling from expert content. Avni talked about our SHIELD framework, which pulls from multiple different entities like Common Sense, like Fosse, like Castle. So we are pulling from the agreed upon established standards that already exist out there for students. And we've woven them into our own SHIELD framework to make sure that the content is actually as effective as it could be. Proven traction with 90% engagement. Kids actually really like this. And you saw some of the illustrations. That animation is phenomenal. And I'm talking as a former engineer who, understands gaming, who understands user interface. It really is a thoroughly engaging, well thought out, and visually stunning game that I think kids are really going, and I don't think kids are really, they've already really taken to this content and the characters and the understanding and the learning and the education that they get. We have a strategic market advantage and some perks. So if you do decide to invest, there are some perks for you. We thank you in advance for considering investing in MASK NextGen, but we also encourage you to do a little more research if you'd like. Head to masknextgen.com. Our Wefunder page is wefunder.com/masknextgen, and you're getting that social impact as well. If you want to invest in something anyway, invest in something that's actually going to make a difference. This is the perfect time. This is the exact right moment for you to join a movement. Avni talked about every 22 seconds. Every 22 seconds, a child is targeted online by a predator. Imagine how many millions of children that adds up to just over the course of a month. But think about a year and think about their lifespans or their entire childhood. That basically says that every child will eventually be targeted by a predator online every 22 seconds. But you have the power to help us empower our young people to know what to do. And I can tell you from the 10 plus years that I've been speaking to students, they understand the how all day long. They can move those little thumbs. They can do all the dance trends. They know all the lingo and all the slang and all the LOLs and BRBs and all that good stuff. But they do not understand the why. They don't understand, why things happen the way they happen on the internet. They don't understand what they can do when things happen to them on the internet, and that's our job. That's what we should be doing, from the beginning. Is our job is to help them make the connection between, all of the things that you're able to do online and what the ramifications, what the potential consequences might be, and what might be the impact on them and on other people from their digital behavior on the internet. We are the ones that are connecting the dots for them. Mask NextGen does a phenomenal job of connecting those dots while also preparing them for the future of work, for the future of a world where artificial intelligence sort of rules the day. They need to be literate, they need to be ready, they need to be fluent in what AI can do, what it's doing now, and what it can do. And so we are hitting them with both barrels, if you will, helping them be safe online, helping them understand digital safety, but also preparing them for the future of a world with artificial intelligence. So we invite you to join us in that process. Again, head to wefunder.com/mask nextgen, and we hope you will make an investment. So we talked about the mission, we talked about the movement. Let's take a look at the product itself. Because again, in addition to the work I do with students, I am a former engineer, and I have to say the design, the look and feel, and the user experience of Mask NextGen has impressed me just as much as the curriculum. And I'm the head of content, so I sort of designed the curriculum, but the actual game itself and the way that it develops and the way that it was put together is just as impressive as the curriculum. And I was able to have an earlier conversation with Christian Hess, our head of product for Mask NextGen, to show us how it works and what makes it different. Take a look. So we've talked about the mission and we've talked about the movement. Now let's take a look at the product itself, because there's something really special about Mask NextGen and how it works and what makes it different. So please join me in welcoming Head of Product, Christian Hess. Hey, Christian.
Hi, Stephanie. I'm really glad to be here today, and it's great to talk to you as always.
Happy to have you here. Happy to have you here. So let's first talk a little bit about the SHIELD framework, because I think it's important that people understand what foundation Mask NextGen was built on.
Yeah, the SHIELD framework really it's educator and existing framework based. So you can walk it back all the way to a myriad of standards, and whether it's a state level requirement, even global requirements, everything that's in the SHIELD framework maps and can be tracked and audited. What's really
Right.
great is as the narratives are kind of playing out each week, in part because of your masterful sort of order of operations that you've put together, we're tackling a set and defined number of learning objectives. And those learning objectives have defined outcomes, they belong to defined domains and tags. And so every week, from a data standpoint, you can really then see a student's improvement given a topic, given an outcome. Did they meet it? And so I think what's beautiful about it is it's not just qualitative. We have these outcomes and then we can measure based on the pretest how much a student has improved given a topic. And one day I'd love to even go to the place where we could maybe do control groups of non-narrative based content to prove how effective the narrative delivery mechanism is.
So, Christian, I know you are a big proponent of gamified learning in particular. Talk to us about why that works so well.
So it's really beautiful. And I talked about this in one of the vlogs that we did, but there's a history in mankind of this generational knowledge sharing. And the primary mechanism for that, before we were working in cubicles and office 9 to 5s, was around a fire. The tribe, the family, whoever it was sharing knowledge. We spent most of our recreational time actually around campfires, according to modern anthropologists. And so what's really, really interesting is that we've sort of deviated from this tried and true methodology for sharing information. But what studies have shown is that actually using stories, myths, legends, fairy tales, these kind of things actually make things stick better with us, including emotional learning outcomes, behavioral learning outcomes. There is a really interesting thing called Hedge's G value. And what it does is it measures in standard deviations learning outcomes versus a control group. And when people are engaged in well done, effectively built narrative and gamified learning, these learning outcomes are huge. I mean, we're talking about at times, sometimes 50, 60, even 80% more effective with
Wow.
retention just because it's been presented in a different way. And I always joke, would you rather have a really cool story like watching a Marvel movie and learning a lesson, or would you rather have your corporate compliance training with the same lesson, right? Like there's a way to deliver this information where it's not just to check a box.
Mhm.
And when you do it that way, people retain it better.
I can believe it. I mean, I've played the game. I've retained all of the information. It's visually stunning. So it really captures your attention right from the very first moment you open it and you engage with it. And I think there is something to that idea of oral histories and why they've been so, I guess, sustainable over the years. And there's data now to show that sharing information in that way actually works a little bit better and helps you to retain that knowledge. So, um, talk about sort of specifically what happens in this game as far as nodes, as far as puzzles. Like, walk us through sort of a day in the life of playing Mask Next Gen.
Yeah, so it's a weekly program. So there's a
Hmm.
dedicated class time. And what I think is really cool about it as well is it's not just the game. There's also a discussion aspect that there are teacher guides and the teacher dashboard. They have their own teacher videos. They also have their own documents that they can go through. And so the students they're not just doing this game and then that's okay, we're done. We're doing this game and then we're going to talk about how this applies to real life and those
Hmm.
around you, or, someone and experience something like this. And I think that really helps sort of tie the knot on everything. But
Yeah.
every week when they're in front of the screen, they're going through basically a whole episode. And I like to think about it like an episode of a TV show.
Okay.
And so they're getting a complete kind of story from start to finish. And then if you ever watched, like a genre show that goes on for seasons and seasons and seasons, not only are you kind of getting the nice whole episode narrative, you're also getting some sprinkles of, the broader story that's going to be told in season 1 or season 2.
Right.
Each week is divided into 3 nodes. And node 1 sort of introduces the topic, the ideas, the problem for that week. What is the challenge that the main cast is facing? And then by node 2, they've started to sort of unravel, uh, you know, really tackle this problem head on.
Hmm.
Typically, at this point, they're in the middle of the challenge, right? I mean, this is Act 2. This is the crisis zone. Things are really coming to a head. And then in each of those nodes, they actually end in something we call a puzzle module. And
Hmm.
this is where, as the learning objectives get sprinkled into node 1 and get sprinkled into node 2, when the students finish that node, they're actually asked through a variety of question types, what did you learn here? Like, and then we try to confirm that this stuck, that this was delivered and that they understand what the point was.
So reinforcing the messaging.
Exactly. This is the
Hmm.
confirmation that, hey, you didn't just receive the narrative, you've comprehended it. And then node 3 is kind of the finale. This is the big showdown. the end of the week. And this is typically this is set in cyberspace,
Hmm.
whereas most of the Node 1 and Node 2 tend to take place in what I call in the real space with the characters. But Node 3 ends in the full blown game. And for elementary, this is typically an easily digestible mini game. Think something like Fruit Ninja or a Match 3 game, something that's very easily picked up and kind of done.
Okay.
Middle school and high school have a much more kind of robust game that is influenced by turn-based games like Pokemon or old JRPGs, and they actually unlock powers as they go that are thematically, tied to each lesson, but they're still having to answer these questions at key points in the game
Hmm.
that are, again, verifying that they've learned the lessons that week. But it really lets you like face the villain, whatever the kind of representation of this villain or archetype is that week. They get to sort of, bring this whole thing to a head and really feel like they were a part of it, not just receiving it, but actually like engaged.
Right, right. So they actually, have some ownership of what happens, and they get to feel like they've contributed to moving that narrative forward.
Yeah, exactly. They get to actually, I think one of my favorite things is as you unlock more powers, Myra can only take 4 powers into the adventure module.
Hmm.
And so every student gets to pick what powers they want to take. And so if you're a student who maybe you struggle with some of the content, so maybe you take powers that tend to provide you with like eliminating wrong answers or healing you if you get some questions wrong and you start to lose some HP. Or if you're like a student who's just crushing it and you're really confident you know it, there's some powers that are really high risk, high reward.
That is super, super cool. Tell us about Myra Anna.
So Myra is I I just fell in love with Myra. She was the first thing that I ever got introduced to for Mask. I
Hmm.
met Avni and she had this design for elementary. Myra was originally what she had.
Hmm.
And I got really into the lore and setting and I sort of asked her, where do you see this character coming from? And the story of Myra is so powerful because she was made by the kids.
Yeah,
And studies have actually shown that kids will self attest that they want more protections online and they're not getting them. Society
absolutely.
isn't, yeah, society isn't keeping up. Regulation is always slow on these things. And so the fact that there's kids who took it upon themselves, like, you know what? I'll make my own superhero who's going to protect me. I think there's a cool level of agency there,
Hmm.
and Myra herself is just awesome. She's funny. She's good natured. I always kind of joke that she has a little bit of Superman in her, but she's way more sarcastic at times than Superman.
Yeah, definitely.
She has like a good sense of humor. I really think she's a relatable character. She's not perfect, but she's
Hmm.
always trying her best, and I think that is what makes her really interesting because she does have some flaws, but at the end of the day, she'd put it all on the line
Yeah,
to do what
absolutely.
was right.
We love Myra. Um, Describe the progression through the grade bands of how that narrative develops.
Yeah, so we have elementary, middle school, and high school,
Mhm.
and the character art actually changes as the kids grow.
I
So
think that's one of the
elementary,
coolest part of it. I love that, high school Myra is a little older, and it just I'm gonna let you finish, but I that's one of the, that's one of my favorite things about the aesthetics of the game, if you will, the fact that it kinda grows with the students, and you did a really great job with those characters.
thank you, thank you. No, we were doing some designs as we were aging some of the characters up. We were playing around with some ideas for how they would grow. And it is really cool because you're with these characters, like as a writer, you're with these characters sort of here's what they're struggling with as at an elementary level. And then, at some point when you're at the high school level, the challenges get very serious because the
Mhm.
challenges that our teens are facing are very serious. And it became increasingly difficult to write these situations because I've been with these characters, since they were like in my brain. It's like, oh, I
Right.
knew you when you were, in elementary, and now I'm really
Right.
putting you through it. Yeah,
You get attached. It's easy to get attached.
yeah. just, there's a couple weeks in high school where Jalen just really goes through it. And I remember I was done writing for that day, and I went for a walk with my wife, and she was like, "You seem, kind of like you're not here. You're in a funk. What's going on?" And I told her, I was like, "I'm just kind of in a bad mood. Like
You
I
like
kind
you
of
feel
feel guilty."
bad. Yeah, you feel bad. You feel you empathize, you have compassion. Like it really does kind of take you through a range of emotions, I think. And um, you know, when we're talking about cyberbullying or, you know, AI chatbot dependence or sextortion even, especially as we sort of relate it all to the idea of every 22 seconds, these are real threats and real challenges that real students in real life are facing. So the idea that we could recreate that in some way and in some significant and engaging way in a game, I think is really, really compelling and is going to make a really big difference for the students that play.
I agree. And I think one of the hardest but most rewarding aspects of all of this is you want to write these situations in a way that is grounded in reality. And yes, I mean, there's some of this comic book logic going on with like Myra as a superhero type thing. And,
Hmm.
um, but at the same time, most of the story and the challenge takes place in the real world. I try to really restrict like the cyberspace kind of superhero storytelling is really more about how do you visualize this abstract concept in your head? How do you put a face
Right.
to this? And then, but I mean, that is not solving the real world challenge. And so a lot of times the student stories, like in the real world, will end with them like finding or having to go do something very difficult in the real world. There's an episode where one of them starts to develop a parasocial relationship with an AI chatbot,
Hmm.
and her friends end up telling her like this is unhealthy. Her parents are worried about her, but her parents aren't really equipped with the knowledge to handle the situation. And so ultimately she ends up going to the school counselor herself and saying like, I really need to talk to somebody about this because my friends are concerned.
Yeah.
um, and so we try to show these situations like you're not just solving this in this sort of superhero, how do we beat Thanos type like Marvel Avengers thing. it's
Right.
it's very much like at the human level. What do you do
Absolutely.
to help yourself in this situation?
And I think that's the most important thing. We're giving students the capability and the language to at least identify the problems themselves and know when something isn't right, but also the the courage really and the confidence and the empowerment to go to an adult when necessary, to understand when that might be necessary, but also to have the confidence to do it. It's one thing to find yourself in a situation that, is scary and that you don't know what to do. It's another thing to actually engage with an adult or a trusted friend or someone that can help you, a resource, a real live resource to help you through that thing. So the idea that we show them that pathway to the better place is, I think, really invaluable.
And it's not always clean, right? I mean, one of the
Mhm.
things I'm most proud of that we did with the writing for especially middle and high is the group is really self watching. Like they're the friend group very much like when one of them starts to sort of find themselves in a dangerous situation or slipping into something dangerous and maybe they don't realize it.
Mhm.
The friend group is very much like, hey, we feel like something could be off about this. And it's not always clean. I mean, a lot of those conversations end in a little tension and a little conflict and a little argument
Yeah.
because nobody wants to be called out or be wrong or feel like they've been duped. And so, we really try to represent this true friendship in this way where it's not always clean, it's not always perfect, but it is rooted in I care about you and I'm worried
Mhm.
about you. And my hope for that is that if students find themselves in a situation where they see a friend going through it, it's not just if you're in the situation yourself, what do you do?
Yeah.
It's if someone you love, your friend is going through this, how do you, we call that being an upstander, but how do you
Absolutely.
assist them and not just stand by and sort of watch this happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about what administrators, teachers, the folks sort of, you know, facilitating the game, what can they expect as far as that teacher dashboard, all of the analytics that they're going to get? What can they expect to be able to capture as it relates to data, maybe for um, progress purposes or something like that? Talk about the analytics a little bit.
Yeah, our analytics for the launch are really cool. You can go at the student level, so at that per student, you
Mhm,
can see how long they spent on a mini game or an adventure module, how many attempts it took them, what their score was, so how many total questions they were asked, because that
mhm,
is variable due to the game, the nature of the game itself.
mhm,
So, some students might get asked more questions. How many did they get right? How many did they get wrong? And you can track all this per week, both on the puzzle modules and on the adventure module itself in the mini
okay.
games. What's really cool though is once you start to aggregate all that data with the pretest scores, you can actually take the content domains. So the pretest, every question on the pretest ties directly to one of the domains.
Mhm,
And so we can actually visualize, like, if I was a student taking the pretest. So Christian goes in, he takes the pretest, and then week four's topic is cyberbullying. And let's say that I just didn't know anything about cyberbullying going in. We can actually show per topic the improvement from the pre and post. But where it gets really cool is we hit the same topics multiple times. Like the first, season of 12 weeks of content is an introduction to each topic.
mhm.
And then we kind of go another layer deeper. And then we go another layer deeper. And so as the students go through a whole year in the program, you can actually see their total competency given a domain like rise consistently, which is really cool. um, the teacher dashboard is classroom focused, whereas the administrator and school dashboards are much more uh, kind of aggregated data. How are students
Right.
doing? What's the completion percentage? Is there a class or a school that's kind of struggling, and if so, why? The teacher dashboard, one of my favorite things is they actually built a really cool mechanism. Our backend developer Luis built a really cool mechanism where if a student meets certain criteria, and I couldn't list them all.
Mhm.
But there's an algorithm that runs in the back. And if one of these red flags on the algorithm pops, the teacher actually gets like a push notification on their dashboard that says, we think this student could be struggling with this
Wow.
topic. And so there's actually a list, like an action item list for the teachers of like, hey, maybe you want to talk to Christian about cyberbullying. For some reason, he's having to do this adventure module, much more than everybody else.
Right.
Why is this happening? And I think that's really cool.
That's amazing. Yeah, because we wanna be able to identify students that are struggling and might need a little bit of extra help. That's wonderful, but also give everybody the big picture,
Yep.
look at how the class as a whole or the school as a whole is doing. So, that's wonderful that you can track trends, but you can also get down to a very granular level, and see what each individual student is doing. Let's touch on the artificial intelligence piece of this because we do a lot around digital safety and digital citizenship, but we are also trying to prepare our students as well with some AI readiness, AI fluency type content as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So AI is, I mean, everybody talks about it, right? And I think
Mhm.
one of the things that I love about Mask is we don't really stick our flag anywhere in a camp of like right now, there's a lot of ethical or uh, kind of
A
good,
lot of
bad,
pro con. Yeah.
pro con. Like I'm going to stake
Yeah.
my flag here, and this is the absolute place I'm putting it. And the reality is, no matter how any of us individually feel about it, it's Pandora's box. It's here to stay,
Hmm.
and at some point, employers are going to expect that you are fluent and competent and literate in using these tools.
That's
And so
right.
the goal is both to talk and discuss transparently about AI. We don't shy away from some of the ethical challenges. We talk about how things are trained. Where did that data come from? Why
Hmm.
is that a challenge? We also talk about context and prompting and how that can change. Two AIs, two different people, same question, can come out with completely different answers, and why that can be the case. And I think one of the things that we're really looking forward to is, as we continue to sort of create these practical examples of AI use, is we're really hoping to find safe ways where we
Yes.
can help students practice prompt engineering
Hmm.
with real-time feedback using very controlled local models that are highly safeguarded, and are basically locally run, instead of having to rely on a third-party tool like OpenAI or Anthropic. And I think students who go through the program and go through all of this AI stuff, uh, my hope is that you could put them side by side with a student who didn't, and the student who went through it is basically going to be an AI super user for the most part, besides model specific quirks.
Right.
An AI super user, just a generalist, more than, someone who might hobby in it. And that's really where it's going to shine, I think, is just the practical output of these students having not just knowledge about prompt engineering, ethical discussions they can have. I'm just really proud of the kind of framework you built for the course of the AI content.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, final question. What would you say to someone who asked why they should have Mask NextGen in their school or with their students?
Because your kids want, like I said earlier about why the kids made Myra, the kids want help.
Hmm.
They know something isn't right. And they know it obviously better than even we do, because they're living it, right? They're the ones with the messages in their DMs, the
Yeah.
ones with their being contacted relentlessly on Fortnite or Roblox or whatever gaming platform they're on. And they want this. The student feedback we've had from schools who've done this has been almost universally positive
Yeah.
across all demographics. And so they want this. And it's our duty as a technology growing, technology really grew with us as we grew up, our generation. We can't let the next generation deal with unsolved, untrained issues because we didn't have that training, right? It's not a good excuse. Like,
Yeah.
we figured it out. It's like, well, things are changing so rapidly now. It's a whole other ballgame. And so we owe it to them, and they want it. And so I can't think of, you know, a better thing than, if how many times is a kid going to come to you and say, I really wish I could have a class on X?
That's
It's
right.
so rare. But this is one of those things.
We owe it to them. They want it. And we at Mass Next Gen have something to give them to help. So it kind of just becomes that no brainer, that this would be the solution. Christian Hess, head of product, thank you so much. This was an awesome, awesome conversation. And thank you for the work you're doing at Mass Next Gen.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. And it's been a pleasure. And we're just looking forward to getting it in the hands of as many students as we can.
Well, I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for being here and for caring enough to show up for our children. Today, you heard the truth about the world that our kids are navigating. Every 22 seconds is a real threat that our children are facing every time they log on to the internet. You met some people who are building a real answer. And you saw that protecting the next generation is not just possible, it is already happening. It is currently happening right here, right now at Mask Next Gen. But it only grows if we grow it together. Mass Next Gen is not just a product, it is a movement. And with every school we reach and every child we protect, it starts with people like you deciding to step in. So, we got to get to the ask. Please visit the Wefunder page at wefunder.com/masknextgen. Invest what you can. Share it with someone else who cares and become a part of building a safer future for our children. The question is not whether this movement will grow, because we are going to do this work no matter what. The question is whether you will be a part of it. We'd love to have you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for helping us create digital superheroes, and thank you for helping make our world a little bit safer. Take care.